big stunner, 100. You stupid, just shut up. Keep breezy, I'm gonna. I'm big boy, dun dun.
John,
what's up, buddy?
Episode 3, Trey,
Let's go.
triple.
Let's go. It's awesome.
Now, summer is winding down.
Yeah.
Super summer in Texas. It sounds like record heat again.
Yes.
Is
Triple
happening.
digits.
How is it?
It's all the heat all at once.
Yeah.
And it's like the sun is just on full solar flare, right? Aimed right at Texas. So it's hot. It is hot.
And it's hot at night. I think that's people like me who grew up on the West Coast, you might not realize that it doesn't cool off at night very much. You know, you might go a good month plus where it doesn't ever go below 80.
Where the air conditioner never ceases to run continuously. Yeah.
It's so tough. Summer, what's funny is, this is our first time. I've never lived in the Pacific Northwest. I currently live in Portland. We're here for like a 2-year stretch, just kind of as we make a transition to empty nest life.
Yeah.
So this was our first full summer here. And apparently July, and having lived in Austin for the last 14 years, apparently July was the hottest July on record in Portland. And my wife and I looked at each other after hearing that. We're like, well, we'll take that any day. Like, it was nice. It would, get down into the high 50s still at night,
Wow.
and cool off. You'd have a cool morning, if you want to go out and get a workout in the morning, it wasn't hot.
Nice.
And even when it was really hot, it was not that hot. Like, I remember days I'd go out for an afternoon ride at like 3 o'clock, heat of the day, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. And, go for a bike ride and have the bike path to myself. And it's only like 92 with really low humidity. So being from Texas, that still does not feel hot to me. And especially when you're moving through air, it feels nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I mean, a tree, seeking shelter under a tree with some shade is the key. But even in shade, it's still
You
hot.
gotta think like a cockroach in Texas. Stay in the dark.
Yeah.
But as someone who needs to be outside to play, and I'm not much for like water sports, Texas was tough for me. I'm not gonna lie, but here we go.
Yes, sir.
All right, I got a couple fun things.
All right.
I don't watch the party conventions because I don't understand it, and I don't see politics as like a team sport, so it's not interesting to me. But I saw a cool thing in the social media that popped up is the Democrat convention. I think is happening now, or has happened in the last few days, and the point of the convention, technically, or both conventions, that's when they actually nominate who the presidential candidate is officially. Okay. So each state has like delegates, and they get to say, yes, we accept the nominee, or they do something, right? And they actually do like a 50 times plus. I think they throw in some other stuff too. Everyone says yes, and the Democrats used music to do that. I thought that was interesting. Not to say anything about any party affiliations because I just don't care, but I thought it was cool because each state got to pick a song. Okay. And let me pull it up. We'll kind of scroll through it and see.
Interesting.
See what we have here. Let's see how this goes here. There. So let me share this now. I thought I wanted to know, okay, what are the states kind of, you'd think it would be artists from those states, which makes sense. Alabama right at the top there, Sweet Home Alabama. That makes sense. Alaska, we're still in the A's here. Portugal the Man, apparently they're from Wasilla, Alaska.
Okay.
Portugal the Man. American Samoa, I don't understand that one. It's Edge of Glory. I'm not going through all of these, but there was some where like you get to kind of the California was interesting because California obviously is musicians, so they actually had 3. They had run through 3 songs there.
Tupac,
Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Tupac, Kendrick Lamar, which is fantastic. Of course, California Love, they had to do that, and then
they nailed it there.
But because Tupac's not from California, they had to throw in a couple more to make sure they represented. So
California's got a lot. Red Hot Chili Peppers didn't get a nod there. They show a lot of California love.
They're not known. They're not known well. I mean, they are known well, but they don't have the cultural impact outside of the West Coast or especially California. That they're very, they have a California likes them more than everybody else. Let's just say that they sing about
Okay.
California a lot.
All right.
Okay, Colorado, something about Earth, Wind, and Fire. But you get to Delaware, and it's you get some of these small states, and they have to kind of find a weird connection. Like
Yeah.
Higher Love by Whitney Houston and Kygo was says here it was a staple of President Biden's campaign. So there's no connection to Delaware. I don't think Delaware has a huge music history. So that was a tough one.
Makes
Georgia.
me think of the Wayne's World. Hey, we're in Delaware.
Yeah, hi, I'm in Delaware. Great scene. Yeah. What is Delaware? Delaware is a place to register your shady business. Is really why it exists.
Okay.
They have some laws there. So pretty much every terrifying corporation in America, their home office, I'm doing air quotes, is in Delaware.
Okay.
Because they have a lot of lenient rules for corporations. That's my understanding. Somebody's probably going to correct me there, but that seems to make sense. Hawaii, they got Bruno Mars. He's from Hawaii. That's a banger, 24 Karat Magic. What's funny is that Idaho, also not known for, their culture that comes out of there, whether it's in the arts specifically.
Yeah.
They use Private Idaho, which kind of is a phoned-in choice by the B-52s. Which is an older song, like got to be in the 80s. And they didn't. B-52s, it says here, didn't even play in Idaho until 2011. Not a big draw for the bands. Idaho, it's kind of out there.
The Coachella won't be taking place out there. Anytime soon.
Kansas. One of the few bands named after a piece of geography that did okay. Carry On My Wayward Son.
Yeah, they nailed it there.
Kentucky, going with Jack Harlow. He's from Kentucky. There was another one, Maine. It's like, they don't really have a deep culture there. What was another one? There was like North Dakota. What's North Dakota going to do? Who's from North Dakota?
Yeah.
Girl on Fire by Alicia Keys. I think she's from New York. But they just kind of went with, that's kind of, let's
I don't see the connection there at all, but okay.
Well, they're nominating a female nominee, so maybe that's the connection.
Sure,
there's no connection
that's
to
cool,
the state
but
there.
Still, that's a reach, man. That's a reach.
But interesting. We'll link it in the show notes. But kind of interesting, like to see, where, what music they kind of picked. Rhode Island doesn't really have, they're just doing "Shake It Off" by Taylor Swift.
They just grabbed the lowest hanging fruit.
Oh, here it is. Actually says Swift owns the single most expensive home in the state of Rhode Island.
She probably owns the state of Rhode Island. That's probably her weekend getaway twice a year.
Yeah, the romantic. Yeah, so South Dakota really doesn't have a deep history. Tennessee, of course, Dolly Parton.
Oh man,
can't go wrong there.
Sorry,
which is a good transition.
Yeah.
Which is a good transition to the next topic I want you to lead here on, because I'm not the country guy.
Oh,
and that is F1 Trillion album.
Yeah.
Album by Post Malone. So he's got a new album out last week. My wife's been spinning it literally nonstop since it came out.
Awesome.
Tell us, what is this thing? What's happening?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that, people who know Post Malone know just how dynamic of an artist he really is. He's kind of landed in that pop kind of, rap space with the auto-tune voice, like he's singing into a fan, Yeah. But he's super great artist. But I think people who really knew him or really know him, and I've only caught little glimpses of it, when he's done, first of all, other covers of like other musicians and other artists, and like his Stone Temple. Well, he did an Alice in Chains cover one time, and I was
Wasn't
like,
bad,
totally. I was really impressed by it. It felt honest, and he nailed it.
He did. Remember during the pandemic, he had Travis Barker on drums over at his house. Somebody else on bass. I can't remember, and I apologize.
Yeah.
But they came over to his house because of the pandemic. He wanted to play a show.
Nirvana.
So they just covered Nirvana songs for a couple hours live
cool.
on the internet, and we checked in and watched it for a little while. It was fun. Like it was good entertainment, and you could tell. I believe Post Malone loves music and loves performing.
Yeah.
And he's truly creative.
Yeah, and I think that only just added to the respect for him. I think it moved him up a level in my book, like outside of that pop kind of potentially cheesy genre where you overhear the song so much, to see that this dude's good. And so underneath even the covers and everything, he's always had a love for country music. And it seems like he's taken more of that on lately. And then here we are with this collaboration. And so I think one of the things that's cool with this is he's partnered up with other musicians in the country industry that are respected and putting together some good tunes. So I mean,
it's funny. He has a disc 1 and disc 2. So the full album is F1 Trillion Long Bed. So I think it's a joke about trucks. Remember that viral video of it was like the Ford F-1000. It was a joke about huge trucks and all that stuff. So he's kind of making a joke at like F-150, F-250. This is the F1 Trillion Long Bed. So I think that's fantastic. So you definitely get a sense of there's just kind of, I don't know if he's making fun of it or just kind of laughing at the culture that he loves. But that it's 2 discs. And the first disc, again, air quotes here, most of them are, he's got a established country singer on the track, including Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton's on there. And she seems to be holding up well. I've heard that song a couple times and she's there.
Yeah.
What's standing out? What are the tracks? Anything you're digging?
Let's see let's see if it's on there. The one that I had some help. Is that on this album? The one that he partnered up with.
You put a single out.
Yeah.
First?
I don't know if it's on this album or not, but
Pour Me a Drink was his first kind of country.
Yeah.
Hit, right.
Yeah.
I had some help. Yeah. There's Morgan Wallen. So that's 540 million plays. So that was out earlier.
Yeah.
Before
That's
the
a
album.
hit. That's just that one right there is just a hit. Like that made it, that broke, and then that's getting so much airtime on country radio right now because those other 2 guys that he sings with are at the top of their game.
Did the Little Nas X Old Town Road, did that get played on country radio? I mean, I know country radio still exists,
but mainly just like Kiss, the main pop station. But yeah, it got in there a little bit.
Okay, and pop stations now mix in some country. Like country doesn't live in its own little world, right?
Right.
That's fantastic. But yeah, so Tim McGraw, Hank Williams Jr., Morgan Wallen, Blake Shelton, Dolly Parton, Brad Paisley, Luke Combs, not familiar, Lainey Wilson, Jelly Roll, I've heard of him, seen him. Ernest, Sierra Farrell, Luke Combs again, Chris Stapleton, Hardy, Billy Strings. So a bunch of.
I like the Blake Shelton song that he has in there too. But,
a bunch of elite
singers. These are all top of the game. So
I think this marks an important point in music history that we should put a pin in the timeline here, where we've seen the crossovers. We've seen Little Nas X, huge hit, which I consider to be as much a country song as it is not a country song, especially the Billy Ray Cyrus version, right? Because originally it wasn't Billy Ray Cyrus, and Billy Ray Cyrus kind of popped in and said, I'll cut a track on there just to validate you in country.
Yeah.
And then
it was interesting because that guitar riff came from a 9 Inch Nails song.
Yeah. Okay.
It's weird. If you go back and check that out, that slow kind of, acoustic guitar little riff that's in there. Yeah, that came from an older late 80s 9 Inch Nails song. Nice. That kind of hidden song.
And you've had like maybe a rap verse in a country song a few times over the last decade or so. And then, you've had some country samples in music. But this is a full on production here. And I think it's going to validate this kind of joining of country and kind of rap hip hop. And it's interesting because those are the 2 I would say the 2 most popular forms of music, in that there's the core listener of country and the core listener of what I would consider kind of radio rap, not like as KRS-One defines it. He says hip hop is the genre, then there's two branches of it. There's rap and there's MC driven stuff like he does, which is lyricism with purpose and meaning, and it's a little more traditional. Where rap is a little more popularized, and you can kind of sing about whatever. So that joining, then those are the 2 only real popular music left, apart from Taylor Swift, which isn't really. It's hard to say. It's not very genre specific. So now you have this mega style of music, which is the country hip hop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How's it being received in Texas?
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why I think it's being received well is because both of those genres of music, are great to put on a big Bluetooth speaker and tote with you to the pool, to the lake.
Yeah.
It's feel good music. And, I think about all of the like fraternities and sororities and tailgates and, Austin being such a big country or a big college town that like it makes sense that these two genres come together because they would fit in either of those playlists or, when they come on, it's not like everybody stops and looks over it like, okay, who bumped the DJ table? Like now we're on a weird song. Like these songs kind of just bounce off of each other. They've got a lot of energy. And I think that down south, those country roots, man, those run so thick and so deep. And so to have somebody like Post Malone, who just is just loved and adored by so many because he's lovable but he's a great musician, and his music just, he's got good music to set a party or to have in the background when you're jumping off a rock into the lake or, sitting under a tent with some buddies, watching the sunset. Or it was, I just think it's received well because it pays homage to the country that exists, and it kind of brings it back to a level of relevancy again, where, those two genres fit hand in hand. It doesn't feel like you're listening to your grandpa's vinyl collection,
Yeah. No, I get it. I'd say, it's more lyrically the country music that's popular like that, and same with the rap that's popular like that. Especially Post Malone, he's really found this way to make interesting sounds, but also not push you to have to work hard to either understand it or like it, which I get. That's why popular music is popular music. So he doesn't get to neither gets really deep in the lyrics. We're not trying to get into politics or, psychoanalysis of mankind and go really heavy on relationships. And I kind of see it like this. I was telling my wife, I don't have to believe a country singer when they're telling, just because they're spinning a yarn, they're telling a story, right? And it's not a heavy story. It's just, my dog left me, hanging out by the lake. And it's like, it doesn't matter if that actually happened in their life. I don't have to believe it. It's just a fun yarn. Whereas when I listen to, like Radiohead, and they're diving into pain, which is where a lot of the great art comes from, some level of pain within, the universe. I believe Tom York has experienced that pain. And if, Tim McGraw kind of tried to do videotape by, I wouldn't believe it, or try to do a song like that, I wouldn't believe it.
Right.
And so it's interesting. So, same with Post Malone. I don't have to believe him, about what he's singing about, because it doesn't matter. He's just out there having a good time.
Yeah.
And he doesn't sing about heavy stuff.
Right.
So it's easy to get into.
Yeah. And that's part of that too, is like in the country music, I've heard country music artists say that country is just singing the story of our lives. And, when you listen to it, it does relate to so much of the South or, the country life. And it is kind of simpler, but there is that struggle, that slow burn of like doing the work every day.
Yeah.
Drinking the beers to take the edge off. And so much of it is, relationship.
Simple.
Losing a girl at a bar.
I think the quintessential, like, I don't have to believe the yarn you're spinning. I can understand the undertone of it. It would be Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison. You never shot a guy. You never been to prison, you never been to Folsom Prison. But you spin you tell that kind of third person story, and it's the true meaning of it is beyond the story. But again, I don't have to believe you. It's just a cool song. So neat. I'm pretty excited what's happening with country and rap kind of coming together. I'm curious to see where this goes. I think this album opens the floodgates. I think it gives permission to a lot more people who may have been thinking about this, and maybe we finally get that Beck country album he teased us with not too long ago. Yeah. So another cool study here. I was on the interwebs, and I found a study came across my feed. The algorithms gave me a little thing on aging. and it's pretty interesting. So I'll link it in the show notes, but full study out of, I'm not going to name all the people that did the study because you get into these scientific studies and it's a lot of people, a lot of bizarre charts and things like this. Pro tip: use ChatGPT to summarize studies. If you see
nice.
them, you just load the PDF into ChatGPT and
Sweet.
then ask it questions about the study. And I had it summarize it, and the headline kind of is what really hits this. And it's talking about aging and how we progress in aging, not just on the surface, like what you look at, but biological markers of age. And it said there's a spike in aging for most people, or in signs of aging, in all the biomarkers and everything, at 44 years old and at 60 years old, which I thought was really interesting because right now the youngest Gen Xers are turning 44 in this year. So if you're born in 1980,
I turn 44 in November, so
Yeah.
I'm right there.
Yeah, you're.
I'm right on
They
the
sometimes
edge.
call us Zennials
Yeah.
because I'm also a young Gen Xer, born in '77. So we started to see the internet in college, maybe in high school. If you were in a wealthier school district, you might have had access to the internet in high school, and so you kind of grew up in both worlds. Especially if you had older brothers and sisters, you kind of lived through them. But our youngest Xers are showing their first biomarkers of aging, and our oldest Xers are kind of in that same space at 60. So I'm curious. I kind of look back. I'm now going to be 47 here in a few months. But interesting. I thought one thing we know in marketing, and this is just a tip, it's not too far off from the age of 38, which is an American number in marketing. Psychologically, the average American male freezes his self-image of himself at about 38 years old, right? So at that age, you kind of, what are your perception of your abilities and the way you think you look to the world, you kind of freeze it right there.
Dang.
Which is why that, I'm not trying to poke a bear or anything like this, which is why that single guy or recently single guy, who's over 38 or definitely over 30, pushing 50, is often looking at women he may be interested in talking to that are closer to 38.
Yeah,
because he still sees himself as that.
Hence the Tom Selleck mustache and the red, sports car.
Yep. So there's something in there. The midlife crisis is kind of that 38 to 44 is where it switches on. So you mentally you freeze yourself at 38. Biologically, there's an important thing happening for most men around 44, and you see it in marketing, and that's where that data comes from. Go by the aisle in the grocery store next time you're there where the Depends are, the adult diapers, and look at the pictures of the men they put on there. They look like they're 38 and they've got fake gray hair.
On the diaper bag. On the diaper bag.
Yeah. Same thing with when you're watching the football and you see the prescription medicine, and it's specifically targeting older people. So it's like blood pressures and things like that. They or erectile dysfunction.
I was going to say that
the guy in the commercial is 38 years old with fake gray hair. Pay attention to that next time. It fascinates me every time I see it because it's like, if that guy has erectile dysfunction at 38, there's something else going on. But I'm not a doctor, so
maybe need to slide on one of those wear-alls anywhere, and just for convenience. You talked about sitting and watching a football game. I won't even have to get off the couch now.
Right?
It's like that SNL skit. Oops, I crapped my pants.
Yes. Yep.
They work. How do I know? Because I just did.
Oh.
That was
so gross.
Well, that's really interesting though, because like, man, I think about some of the things that I've been through in the past couple years, and if I go off of this locked in self-image of my 38 or 36,
38
and 38, even either way, and then now it makes me wonder, like, okay, what do I need to do to like get past some of this stuff that like I'm hanging on to that's keeping me there? And I say that because, dude, like my whole life has changed in the past 2.5 years. And I mean, I'm getting old. And maybe this is a marker of getting old too, is I got diagnosed with freaking diabetes. And
you were like pre-diabetic, right? Lost a lot of weight. How's that going, by the way?
I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so I mean, that's this image. You said image, and that's different because if you looked at a picture of me when I'm 36, with my shirt off, and then now with my shirt off, I mean,
you look better now.
Well, I mean, it's not even a picture worth looking at. But what I'm saying is like there is a stark difference. And so, like, just it's something as simple as the other day, I went out to the lake with my daughter. We were fishing. Her croc fell off of her foot off this bluff. Like this straight down kind of cliff, and it landed in the water. And I was like, oh geez, I don't really want to buy another pair of Crocs. Like, so I jumped off of it, swam down there, got it. And then I looked up the bluff and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of here. Like, I'm going to have to swim. Like, but then I just like put the Croc in the corner of my mouth and I started like scaling up the side of this thing. And I totally made it up the side of this. Like, it was like straight rock
cliffs
climbing.
of despair.
I couldn't have done this when I was 36. Physically incapable of climbing the side of it. Like, if anybody was down there, they would say, "Don't try to climb up. You're good. You just swim around the side." Like, because the eye test would say this guy ain't gonna make it. It's like with the guy who's like standing on the edge of the platform before he's about to go like on the zip line. He's already not going to be able to hang.
This is going to be
So like that just makes me wonder a little bit about our aging, and I think that idea, this midlife crisis that we hit, how much of that plays into this ideal that we were hanging on to when we were 36 or 38 and what we thought things ought to be by the time we're 45 or 48 and feeling that gap and stuck in some ways in this image of what it was. So
or you can you could use it to motivate you. Like, you can have that health scare at that age, or let your aging scare, or see yourself in the mirror, or try to do a sport or activity that you've always done, and all of a sudden you can't do it at the level you would hope, even if you're reducing your expectations. Letting that motivate you to do the things and the work you need to do to increase your health and your ability, learn new things, all that stuff. I find, and there's light in a tunnel. I will say this to a lot of guys, as a recent empty nester. So I've been an empty nester technically for just over a year. And my kids are off doing their own thing, college, etc. And I have a lot more free time. I race bikes, and ride bikes at a very high level. And I have for 30 plus years. I played basketball in college. Originally, I thought I was going to be a professional skateboarder. That's my first love. I still skateboard as much as I can. I'm about to be 47, so I'm very active. But probably I'm in the best shape on the bike I've been probably since my 20s.
Wow.
Because I have the time. So, I was lucky, when the kids are in high school, I started, especially when one or more of them can drive, I started to get in better shape because I'm having to drive kids and do less stuff. But, elementary, where you're all the things going on, middle school, and you have to, they're not very independent. So you have to handle all that stuff. I was lucky if I could ride my bike total if I could do about 10 hours of workout in a week, that was an incredible week. And now it's like I get 10, 11 hours without even blinking.
Wow.
And more than that, my Saturday is my day now. I can just go ride and I have no pressure to get back out to the house. And so, last Saturday I was out for 8 hours, just tooling around the country and hanging out with people. And so it comes, but you got to bridge that gap.
Yeah. That's the hard part. It's like balancing that, like with the activities of the kids, your work, your schedule, your wife, and making time to focus on all those things and balance all that out, depending on what kind of person you are. Where does that land? Where do you prioritize those things? How do you find the time for it, the money for it? And so, like, for me, I think there's a good chunk of people like myself that push a lot of the things to the back burner. And it's like prioritizing other things before that. And so then there's a little bit of a challenge there to not feel like a jerk or like you're neglecting things. When you put those things first for yourself, especially when they're a little more recreational than they are.
You feel guilty.
I played golf twice this week. It's like, okay, but do you realize that
that's the important stuff. That's the important stuff.
Yeah, but figuring that out is the hard part. It's so hard because there's so much tension around.
So I'll say this before we move to the next topic. How I did it and maintained a really good fitness compared to the population, maybe not compared to competitive cyclists and stuff like that. I play basketball as much as I can, and that's part of it. Skateboarding was a part of it. Surfing was a part of it. But here's the tip that works for me: is if you can make it 2 or 3 things in one. So how I stay fit is also my social engagement. The friends I spend the most time with nowadays are friends I'm riding bikes with. I'm working with a couple friends right now. We're going to have a trip. We're going to go to California next month, and we're going to ride bikes, all over wine country. And so I'm getting a vacation. I'm getting the social interaction I need with other men, and I'm getting the fitness I need. And then I'll go bike packing in a few weeks with some other friends. Same thing. We're going to ride. We're getting exercise. We're getting community. And what comes with both of those is the accountability. So if you schedule a backpacking trip with a bunch of guys in a few months, you better start hiking, hitting the Stairmaster, doing stuff like that, because you don't want to show up and be the guy that's dragging.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to, going to a gym and doing a workout has never been something I've been able to do.
Yeah.
But if it's fun and it has a community component, I think that's why CrossFit is such a big hit, because there's a community component and there's an accountability.
Yeah. I think what's really helped me with what you're saying is, our go-to is fishing, which is more recreational. I mean, it's a sport, but to me, there's like a hunting element to it. But you're out in nature, you're trying to figure out what to use, what to do, but then you get to hike around. We don't hop on a bass boat. We have a lot of bank areas to fish from, quite a bit to explore and to check out. And then I bring 1 or 3 other kids along with me, my children and or their friends. So just to your point, I'm getting a hike out of the deal. I'm getting the outdoors. I'm getting the sport element or the hunting element. And then I'm getting that time with the kids, which to me is the priority, which is the greatest give back and all that. But doing something I care about and doing something I love, including my children in it. Thankfully, they like it. And then getting to move around a little bit. The hiking can get, pretty, it's intense. Super rocky and sketchy at times. But it's awesome. So that's a good point, man. Trying to find 3 or 4 things you can overlap.
Yeah, definitely the 2, get exercise and get community. If you can find an activity that gets you that, playing basketball, golf, the accountability that goes with that. And even when you're not always doing it with community. Like I don't ride with my bike with people. I don't play basketball with people. I don't, you're not going to play golf with people every time. You're going to go to the driving range and work on your shot, because when you do, you want to be able to perform it to your expectations. So you're going to invest a little more in, so you get that drag effect. So man, think about it in terms of that. But if you're just like, I need to work out, this Christmas, and you start thinking about New Year's and I'm going to start running, bro, you're going to be done with that in a few weeks. But if you joined a running club with some people that you already know, you might last 6 months or whatever, or you might turn that corner where, okay, I'm now in a good enough shape where this is now fun. It's not torture. So community is huge for me anyhow. That's how it works. I'm not that disciplined to just go work out.
Same.
But so topic of the day, we are talking books. We're talking literature. So the first 3 episodes, we're just kind of hitting broad topics. We talk music, we talk movies, and I want to talk books. And then next week we'll probably talk food, and that's kind of I think those are the 4 major things.
We should just hop forward and just go straight to the food.
When I want to get to know people and I want people to know me, I want to start there because it's easy to touch on. So we're keeping this one simple. We're talking top 5 your favorite books, and I put a couple honorable mentions in there. But John, I'll have you start.
Oh my gosh! And anybody who knows me they're just already laughing. Like, okay, John, literature, go.
Well, let me say this: I want to take pressure off everybody. Everybody, reading isn't for everybody. It's not. Whether it's time, whether it's just you haven't read the right books, or you just would rather listen to a podcast, watch a video, that sort of thing. On a couple of mine in the show notes, I'll have like TED Talks of the book, so you don't have to read it if you don't want to. But the number, I don't have it in front of me. Maybe I'll put it in notes when I go look it up, but it's very high. It's definitely over 80%. I think it's pushing 90+% of Americans never read a book front to back after they finish high school.
That's wild.
Right?
So yeah, a couple of things that you're sharing right there. Do you have anything else you were going to add to that?
No.
Okay.
So there's no pressure. So if you don't read a whole lot, most people don't.
Right. So, so growing up, like reading to me was always like a pressure, or like it was an effort. It was a job. Like, and the weird part is that my mom's an author. My mom's written 25 books. So it's almost like I should be this bookworm. But I learned to read. But then once I learned to read, I was the reading I did came at me from the school. So it was like, okay, you got to read start filling in the classic elementary into middle school into high school books that English classes make you read.
Where the red fern grows.
Yeah.
The Old Man in the Sea.
Yeah. So like to me, that was my reading, because like in that, here's the key. Here's the catch. What I discovered is that, and on my own, that I have some reading disability and comprehension disability, and I think that it comes from undiagnosed like ADD, ADHD, where it's a strain for me to read, and then when I read it, I go back and I'm like, I just looked at all the words, but like, what was that about? I got to go back and read it again. So
I do the same thing.
What I think I do best is get a book, open it up, and just kind of start thumbing through it and looking for like the chapter, like main point of the name of the chapter, and read a couple sentences and kind of thumb through it. And into my adulthood,
that works in nonfiction.
Yeah, exactly. And then into adulthood, I've worked at 2 churches, and in our church, both of our churches, books have been handed to me on these Christian leadership principles. And so, like, it's learning those things. They're more like learning handbooks about how to do these things, how-to books. And so, like, that's the vast majority of my reading has been limited within some reading comprehension issues into these books that get handed to me from more or less my boss. So, never did I like go find a hammock and I just, cold glass iced tea and laid back and was like, okay, I'm just going to just let the wind blow. I'm going to read as much of this book as I want, and then just, read a couple of chapters or read the whole thing, or dying to get back to read what's going to happen next. So I just felt the need to kind of put that out there on my end.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of the leadership genre. I don't have any. Of course, same thing. Like I've had people are always recommending those. If you're on LinkedIn, it's just leadership book wankfest on there, where everyone's just recommending leadership books. And I find with those, you can just read the first couple chapters and you have the bullet points, and that's it. You don't need anything else. You don't need to read the rest of it, because now they're just regurgitating the same thing.
You get the formula, you get the name of the steps, and you're good.
Yeah. Give me your grid. Then I'm good. But yeah, no, and I remember Choose Your Own Adventure books.
I actually liked those books.
The choice you had to make. So if you had never read them, it was a book where you'd read it, and then at the end of every chapter, you were given a choice of the narrative, and you would flip to the page it tells you to flip to continue the story based on what you chose.
Yeah, Billy stumbled upon a treasure chest in the woods, but it was covered in a mysterious glowing, ooze. Does Billy leave the chest alone and go back home, or does Billy crack it open? If he goes back home, turn to page 86. If he cracks it open, turn to page 120.
Exactly. And I would always pick what I thought would be the shortest story.
Yeah, Billy died. It came to he opened the treasure chest. He's dead. The end.
I want it to be over. I didn't like reading when I was young. A whole lot, partly because I didn't really need to, because I have ADHD inattentive type, which means I can learn really fast, and I learn faster than I can read. And so oftentimes, especially in elementary, middle school, high school, I could just listen to the class discussion on a book, and then I'd pass the test. I didn't need to read the book.
Same.
Maybe skim it a little bit. So I'm just very good at taking tests and very good at just absorbing that kind of information, but very terrible at just locking in and reading a book. But when I got to college, I had to read, because it's just college reading. And so I kind of fell in love with reading, and I got a tip from someone like, you're reading. You have to read a lot of stuff that might not be interesting, especially the first couple of years of college when you're doing that general ed. And someone recommended to me, hey, grab a fiction book or something that's just fun that you want to read. So just to stay tuned up, stay warmed up. And then when you sink in, you're already kind of in flow. And then you can read that economics book or whatever you had to read.
Yeah.
That theology thing you had to read. So, John, top 5 books right now, top of your head. We have lists. We'll put them in the show notes. But John's got 5. I've got 5. John, give me your first one.
Okay, it's super cliche. But it's honest because this is the book I've most read, and I actually choose to read. I open it, I actually read it. Like, this is the book that I spend time with, but the Bible. So I read the Bible. It's the book I've most read. I still crack it open. I still read it, and so for me, that's just it's my top book. It is what it is. That's it right there.
Nice. John and I both worked in church space. I thought that was going to be my career early on because I just went to college to play basketball. I didn't know what I was going to do. Got a business degree, but also my studies were in theology, specifically the Christian variant of theology. So I studied the Bible in Greek and Hebrew and all that stuff, and plus lots of other religions, origin stories, which I'm very fascinated with. Theology in general, religion in general, spirituality in general. So yeah, I've definitely spent a lot of time reading the Bible in different languages and interpreting it and writing about it, speaking about it. So yeah, you can't deny the importance of it, regardless of what your faith is. I often encourage people to read some of the other books. Take a look at the Quran. I read the Tao Te Ching pretty regularly, which is kind of the Taoist stuff, and very, very similar to Proverbs type literature, where it's just kind of wisdom nuggets. So I probably read the Tao Te Ching more than any when it comes to spirituality these days. It's probably the only spiritual book I'm reading with any regularity. The Bible I read so much, I feel like I don't need to anymore. Like, I get it. So cool. Let me go off the top now. I'm going to hit with a heavy one. I'm not a big fiction reader. I really only have 3 fiction books, 2 in my top 5. The rest are thinky books. So, I don't want to say business books. So the first one's by Jeremy Rifkin. So I was introduced to Jeremy Rifkin by my philosophy professor in college. And he, with an out-of-print book he wrote called Algeny, Algeny, which is kind of a rethinking of Darwinism. So by education, by tradition, Jeremy Rifkin is a sociologist and an economist. He's brilliant. He's actually the chief consultant to the EU and China in their move to new energy, which is weird. Anyway, the book was really just kind of taking a new look at Darwinism, kind of like how social economics took a look at economics and said, you know what, that there's science to this, but there's human behavior that we need to think about too, and what this means, and what does it mean to be human, and that sort of thing. So it was a fascinating book for me to read. And then fast forward, I came across a small video that was just a segment of what he was talking about at the Royal Society for the Arts in England, which is like the TED Talk of England.
Yeah.
And was fascinated by it. I'm like, I'm going to read that. And the book is called The Empathic Civilization. And it's the subtitle kind of gives a little sample of what it's about. And it's the subtitle is The Race to Global Consciousness in a World in Crisis. Okay. So Rifkin is taking the first third of the book. He's going into what different schools of thought say it is to be, 1, human, and 2, how do we empathize? How do we connect to other humans? And so he goes down, the Judeo-Christian narrative of what that means, how we connect, and Judeo-Christian narrative. So your 3 Abrahamic religions really is that man is born evil and needs to be cleaned up. Then he went to kind of some of the psychological guys, like Kant, what's his name, where you're born to just want to have sex, the German guy, and then Darwin's theory on what humans are, that there's blank slate, there's what is our primary drive as a human, And he summarizes it all up and says it's none of those. Our primary drive as a human, once your core needs are met, I mean, obviously you need to eat and have shelter and clothes, those things. But the primary drive beyond that, when it comes to your existence within humanity, is to belong. And science has proven this by discovering the empathic nervous system that we have, how we actually connect with people. And you experience that on the daily when you are watching a video on YouTube and it's like from like Kook of the Day or Jerry of the Day, and it's someone skiing or skateboarding and they get absolutely wrecked and you cringe inside because you empathically feel their pain. So your nervous system can actually react to seeing someone else. You can react to their joy, their pain, their feelings. You're connected to them. It is our strongest drive beyond all those other things. It's not, our strongest drive is not to have sex. Our strongest drive isn't that we're this blank slate. Our strongest drive is not to sin. Our strongest drive is to belong. And then he goes on to really connect that to where we're headed. And how we connect changes because of our technology. You know, in the early days, you only connected, you only cared about the people in your tribe. But then you started to care about people in your city state and then your nation state. And now, because of new media, our empathic nervous system can connect to people on the other side of the globe in real time. You know, when you see a horrible earthquake devastate a city and you see the clips, you feel that pain. And that's unique and it's important. And so he's saying we have to figure that out because we are getting more connected and we have to overcome the frictions that come with that. And it's a long book. It's a book I almost never stop reading because it's something I care so much about. I feel so connected to people. 700-page monster,
man.
But it's such a good book. I'll link it, but also link the video, which is only like 8 minutes. And anybody can watch that. So The Empathic Civilization, Jeremy Rifkin, my favorite book. I recommend it constantly to everyone.
Dang,
John,
man.
what's next?
Jeez. Okay. Slight turn.
That's how I think. And I got to apologize. I love heavy philosophy. I love really tough thinking. Yeah. That's the kind of books I like.
Awesome,
my second one isn't like that at all. So I got a cupcake coming up next.
So not recently, when I had just graduated high school, I was going to the University of Texas, and I got my hands on this copy, and it reminded me of just how much I enjoyed it as a kid. But I got my hands on this like kind of vintage, old print of The Little Prince, and that was a book
that's one of the Chronicles of Narnia books, right?
I don't think it fits on that like time.
Who wrote it?
Oh boy,
I'll look it up. You keep talking.
Yeah. So I got my hands on a copy of it, and that was one I kicked back and I just read through, and man, I was really surprised at how much it made me feel. And I think that I appreciate that because, man, like recognizing feelings and feeling the feelings as a dude, you know, that's a need. Like I need to feel, I need to recognize my feelings, and I want to, you know, I don't want to just avoid all the things or, you know, push, you know, so it stirred up a bunch of feelings in me, and they were these simpler, but deeper and more powerful feelings of, you know, at first you think it's just this story about this lonely kid or the lonely prince living on this isolated planet about loneliness. And, you know, one of the things that when you read through it changes your perspective a little bit about love, because he has this rose that he needs to take care of. And just that relationship right there is just the way he serves it and cares for it and tends for it beyond himself. I mean, it just, I don't know, man. There's something about that book that just grabbed me. And I was like, dang, that was way more powerful. I think at one point near the end, I cried. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm reading this like kid's book. And it's like totally grabbing me out of this book. And so he meets this fox. And man, what does the fox say? What does the fox say?
Well, the fox in the Antichrist says, chaos reigns, but I don't know what he says in the Little Prince.
He says it's only with the heart that one can see rightly what is essential is invisible to the eye. So basically, it's just saying like use your heart, man, and that there's things at play that when you lean on your heart, you know, it'll help you see the essential things that you can't see. So it was good.
The Little Prince published April 1943. Author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, English edition. It might have been in French. English and French.
I think it was a French.
Yeah, it looks kind of similar to kind of a hybrid of a couple books that are on my list. Actually, I'm adding to the list. I'm going to read that because I'm intrigued.
Why I would put that on there?
I mean, it looks good. Like I love that. Good. I love wonder. I love imagination. You know, I love a book that can take me to a place and sink into it. So really cool. The Little Prince, Antoine Saint-Exupéry. I'm definitely hacking that name. Exupéry. So very cool. So my second book, you know, you remember the Scholastic Book Fair at your school? You know, you got your parents gave you $5, $10. You were in Westlake, so you got $10. You know, I might get $5 in, you know, $3 bills and some quarters and nickels. In my house was whatever I could find in the ashtray in the car. So, this is book fairs today. Okay.
Yeah.
And I got this book, and it's called Hatchet.
Yes,
by
sir.
Gary Paulson. And I had always been, you know, love to be immersed in the outdoors and since a young age. So I went to kindergarten in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Yes.
Okay. So my dad had, prior to, I don't know the story. I'm going to have to figure it out because I'm so young compared to my brothers and sisters. My parents are so old. I don't know my whole family story, but I have, you know, vague understandings of timeline. Kindergarten I did up in Munising, North Shore of the Upper Peninsula, surrounded by nature, lakes everywhere. You know, Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes, and the Upper Peninsula is just a peninsula that comes off Minnesota. So we had a cabin on a little lake. And so I saw this book, and it kind of had a picture that looked like the lake I lived by, and it had a hatchet on it. And so the premise is a kid who's, I think 12, 13, you know, a little older than me, old enough to be cool, you know, but old enough to understand as you know, a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, you know, back then. But now I'm probably, when I'm buying this book, I'm, you know, 8 or 10 or whatever. It's like 3rd grade, maybe 4th grade. And his uncle or somebody's flying him in like a Cessna. It's just the two of them, and they're going somewhere, and they crash land in a lake. And the pilot, you know, whether I think it's his uncle or somebody, dies, doesn't make it. He swims out of there, and he gets to shore, doesn't have anything. At some point, swims back out to the plane to see if he can get anything out of it that's going to help him live, and he gets a little hatchet. Right. And that's all he has. And so he's trying to survive on the shore of this lake. And he's got a hatchet, and he just goes through little adventures. And for me as a kid, I was like, you know, it sounds like a horrible thing, but I was like, wanted to do that. Like, I want to go survive by my own and have that freedom and just be out in nature. Like, it was just something that about it that captivated me. And to this day, that book's always just had a deep sear into my psyche. And today I still love going out, you know, in nature, and I do it often by myself because at my age and as an empty nester, you don't have a lot of people that have the time I do to go do that. So,
dude, we had to read that book, English 7th grade. You know, it was an assigned reading, and I enjoyed it. You know, this was before the Naked and Afraids and the, you know, Survivor shows, The Alone. You know, and I love watching
the OG.
Alone. Have you watched Alone, by the way, the TV show Alone?
No.
You might want to just check an episode.
Is it streaming? Is it on the stream?
Yeah, they have it on the Hulu, and I think they have a season or 2, I think, on Netflix. But basically, they just drop off like 10 people in isolated locations and
it's a reality
middle
show?
of nowhere. Yeah, but
I'm out. No,
but it's good though. But it's good. It's a good one. It's I hear you.
Okay,
but
I'll trust
they only
you.
I
trust
they
you.
only get like 5 items, and it's just how long can you live in the Arctic tundra
actual survivor.
Yes. And they get this little button, and they can hit the button and they get pulled out of there. There's no team competitions. There's no, I mean, it's just a person with his GoPro or a woman, and they just go until they can't go anymore. And the last one that's there wins the money.
So
and
it's Les Stroud, not Bear Grylls.
Yes.
Les Stroud's the man. I wish he would. It sounds like it was just too hard on him physically, so he doesn't do it anymore. But
well, I was going to say they kicks everybody gets their butts handed to them on this show. It is brutal. It's like brutal.
That's awesome. So I might have to watch that a little bit.
kinda
Although
good.
I protest reality TV because it's just so unimaginative, but I'll give it a try. I'll give it a look. So,
Yeah.
John, what's your next? What's up next?
All right. Well, I kind of sticking with like the kids book genre, but my next book on my list is The Giving Tree. Did Shel Silverstein write this one? Because if he did,
no.
Okay, well maybe he drew the
Oh, you did. Yeah, you
illustration.
did. Sorry, yeah, totally blanking.
He's one of my favorite authors of all time. I mean, he wrote ghost stories that I read as a kid. He wrote that Where the Sidewalk Ends. His illustrations were crazy and gnarly looking.
The Light in the Attic.
Yes.
The Light in the Attic was the same as Where the Sidewalk Ends. It was just a bunch of short poems. Right?
And I loved them.
Loved it, yeah.
And he wrote this book, and the illustration too kind of captures just this story of a tree and an apple tree and a kid. And over the years, this apple tree provides everything. And along the way, like a place to play, it provides shade, it provides a place to hang a tree, it provides a place to meet up with the girlfriend and carve their name in the tree. And all along the way, he's just taking and taking and taking. The tree's just giving and giving and giving until at the end of the book, he's an old man just sitting on a stump. And yet the tree is still full of love. Even though it's given everything, it still has this heart to continue to give, even when the boy and the man doesn't even recognize its own selfishness, that the tree still has that heart. And so it's just this, I think, this dynamic of being a kid and growing up with my parents and then making the shift of being a parent and having my kids. It's like this love of a parent, of a child that you're just providing for and giving for, that, sometimes you can relate a little bit on either side, whether you're the person taking from the tree or you're the tree giving. And so I don't know, I like that book, man. When I read it, it's just it's a powerful story of love and selflessness. And it's a classic on my list.
It's covertly anti-capitalism.
I didn't know that or realize that.
No, it's Shel Silverstein, core to the Gen X experience, right? We all grew up on that stuff. Can't go wrong there. I'm gonna have to re-dig into some Shel Silverstein. Haven't been into it in a long time. But
I think why these are on my list is because these were books that kind of spoke to me as a kid. And then when I would lay down and read next to like one of my kids over the years, I would reach to the books that I enjoyed, like the Dr. Seuss or the Shel Silverstein. And so I read the Giving Tree back to like each of my kids at one point, next to it's just like a little kid's book.
Keep the Dr. Seuss's. Two things you keep as your kids age out: the Legos and the Dr. Seuss's, because those are both are timeless, and the grandkids are gonna make use of both.
Yeah,
Hot Wheels I think are probably in there too.
Yeah.
Let me go to another thinky book. Sociologist from NYU, Clay Shirky, brilliant dude, who is. I saw him speak at South by Southwest, I believe, in 2011, and he was speaking on the heels of the Arab Spring, if you remember that going on with some of the uprisings in the Middle East, and some protests, and Tunisia actually at the tail end of that actually got a new constitution. That was a successful uprising, and a lot going on, but it was driven a lot by social media. And to one of his points, and I'll touch on the book where his thoughts come from. He says the Arab Spring was not caused by new media or social media, but it would not have been possible without it because of the ability for average people to synchronize and coordinate at scale in real time. And to that end, he also says I'm blanking, but it would have been possible without social media. And so the book where he gets that thought is called Cognitive Surplus. And it's interesting because, a lot of people have, mixed feelings about Wikipedia. Remember Wikipedia came out, or it started to get big, and teachers were like, don't go there. It's not reliable.
I feel like there were mixed feelings because people would hijack things and it made it funny. And it made
that's all you would hear about.
Yeah,
that's all you would hear about. But the reality is at a scholarly level, when looking at Wikipedia, it is very reliable and highly accurate.
Right.
yes, there's always going to be a bad actor in there trying to do something. But I encourage anybody, if you haven't, create a Wikipedia account and go try to edit a page, and even be kind of accurate. You're subject to a level of scrutiny by the community that is powerful, and that's the point of the book. Is we're now in this era where groups of people distributed making small investments in things is very powerful because of the scale. Think open source, and Wikipedia is one of the, for lack of a better way to describe it, Wikipedia is one of the greatest things mankind has come together and built. However you feel about it, it is very accurate, but it is constantly being updated, millions of lines of sentences, almost per minute, worldwide in every language.
Wow.
And that's all being done by people for free, just making small deposits. And it's something we've never seen in humankind, our ability to contribute a little bit to something, and it has an impact.
That's cool.
And I don't have to, really cool. And I'm in I live in a business world and that sort of thing. So it's relevant to me, and his ideas in this space really are a part of how I shape businesses, or how I consult, how we bring products to market. Because one thing you always have to consider, and again, I'm nerding out in the business world, is, you can't really create a product built on having scarcity anymore. You can't deliver something where you're dependent on having content nobody else has, because that's not the case anymore. If your business is built on, and in your world, this is a big reason a lot of churches are struggling with attendance, because there's not the need. I don't have to go to a church on a Sunday morning to listen to a sermon anymore, right? I can listen to the sermon from almost any church in the world, anytime I want, when it's more convenient for me. And so that's part of it. But interesting book. I love the way it makes me think about how people connect and how people do things. He wrote a book before this called Here Comes Everybody, and it was how do groups get anything done. Wow. But really, really important. And the thing I was also going to say is it overlays kind of how technology enables this. And the point I had forgotten earlier was, he was saying the Arab Spring wasn't caused by social media, but it would not have been possible without it. Just like the Protestant Reformation was not caused by the printing press, so it would not have been possible without it.
Interesting.
And so what it means is, what he's saying is, control by institutions, just by having scarcity or just being able to control information, is not powerful anymore. And so this is why governments are struggling if they can't control the information. So we'll see. But he also says, I expect a lot of chaos, and we're in that period of chaos right now. So it's comforting. He says we're going to have about 50 years of chaos, because the internet and new media is not that old. You got access to Facebook and Twitter in 2007. Yeah, barely a teenager now.
It's wild.
Great book, Cognitive Surplus. Clay Shirky. He's got a couple TED Talks. I'll link to the TED Talk for that book on there. You don't have to, again, if you're not a reader, just spend the 11 minutes and listen to his TED Talk. He's got some great thoughts there. So, John, what do you got next?
All right, I'm going to hijack something here. We got a list of books that we read, books that we recommend, and so this one I'm kind of breaking the rules a little bit on, because I was working, in college, and through college I was working at Starbucks, and I had heard that they were going to release the first of these Lord of the Rings movies.
Ooh.
And so I had always heard of the Lord of the Rings through the books, but when I looked at the books side by side with each other, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like a quarter of a shelf. I don't know if I can dig into that. Well, just as I was really interested in these Lord of the Rings coming out, and like, man, I couldn't wait for the movie to come out. Somebody had handed me this like briefcase, and inside of the briefcase was the full 100% reading word for word by the BBC, the English stage community that like you would find up in Broadway.
So it's kind of a dramatic reading.
On CD.
I've
handed them to me.
I've heard that.
And so I had a commute at that time, because I was living in Northwest Austin. I had to drive downtown to work at the Starbucks and to go to school. So I had, 30 minutes to and from, and I just popped it in, and it was the reading of it. So I got to kind of read.
Audiobooks are fine. I can't do them because I'll lose track, but they're fine.
This one was cool. It had sound effects, the different voices for each of the characters. I felt like I was watching the movie, but I was driving, so I could see where I was going, but I'm like listening to the movie. And it was done so well. The voices were good. The sound effects were cool. It totally just like sucked me in. And I couldn't wait till the movie came out after listening through those. It took a while to listen through them. And I listened to them on CD, which, is totally different, but it was cool.
I read The Hobbit with my son before the movie came out, when the Hobbits were coming out.
Yeah. Did you read it? Read them or listen?
I read it. Yeah. Like I struggle. So to let people into the ADHD mind, especially inattentive type, which is what I have. So I'm not like hyper. There's people often wrongly, and there's some people who are hyperactive type ADHD where they just they fidget. Where mine, my brain moves so fast. It could be painful to listen to people talk who talk slow, and probably painful to listen to myself if I did. But the problem with the audiobook is my mind will go faster than they talk, even when I speed it up. So they might say an interesting thought that triggers a thought in my brain that my brain finds more interesting than what they're saying. And so now I'm completely disassociated and not even listening. And 20 minutes might go by as I write my own story in my head. Totally. And I'm like, so I'm rewinding constantly. I tried the audiobooks. And Malcolm Gladwell did one a couple of years ago where he put it together like a podcast. So instead of it being a reading of the book, there was a book you could buy, but he produced an audiobook, air quotes, that was more like a podcast where the interviews and people talking and quotes were actually the people talking and being interviewed and quoting. And there was, soundtrack, and it felt more like listening to a podcast, and I could engage with it. I forgot what that's called, but maybe I'll throw it in the honorable mentions as we get going. Sweet. But yeah, we can't go wrong with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Great read. I think everyone should try that. Those are books worth trying to read.
Get in the fantasy realm a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm going to get there. My last book is a kind of a fantasy, a sci-fi book that I think needs to be made a movie. Come on. I'm going to go to one that's interesting that I think is a genre I need to get more into, and it's straight dad, and that's historical nonfiction that reads like a novel. So, your dad, my dad read some. He got in some of the war history books, Civil War, World War II. Like I think my dad was Silent Generation. We're into that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's going to be happening with Gen Xers. Are we reading war books or spy books? And I read a book that was recommended to me by someone as I was talking through, I can't remember what, but it's called All the Shah's Men by Stephen Kinzer. And it is it's nonfiction history, but it's written almost, it flows like a novel. And it's the history of the 1953 overthrow of Iran by what became the CIA. It was basically the CIA's first thing they did in conjunction with the British Empire and what is now called British Petroleum. It's really, I read it because I wanted to understand, we're in the era of, getting into, the terrorism thing, what's happening in the Middle East, that sort of, I wanted to understand it. And this really is the root of it, like understanding. And this is one where I am blown away that this hasn't been made into a movie. Closely adjacent to it is Charlie Wilson's War. Touches on some of the people that were involved in this, because that came like 30 years later.
Interesting.
Because the CIA was more developed at that point. But it really...
What movie style, like if you could have the director direct this film, what style of movie would this be? It
would have to be done like a Tom Clancy movie. I honestly, I can't think of who the directors are that do that stuff. Michael Mann. I think I would love to see Michael Mann try to do this, because he's really good at immersing you in the feeling of the scene. So he did Heat, is probably his most famous one. That'd be cool. It's not a big action thing. It's really, it's covert spy kind of stuff, but it really gives you a sense of when you think of all the chaos in the Middle East, and I'm not a poli-sci guy. I don't have horses in the fight, but we tend to, as humans, pay attention to the things that scare us. We have to. It's just part of evolution, just for survival. If something scares us, we are prone to pay attention to it. That's why with the press, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads, right? And so I wanted to make, it help me make sense of what's happening in the Middle East, and it sucks that the powerful empires of the world, America being the predominant empire in the world right now, the chaos in the Middle East is a feature, not a bug, right? It is easy to control or have an impact when you're not a part of the Middle East if you can keep it chaotic. And this is where the chaos starts, 1953, with the overthrow of Iran by the CIA. True story. Really, it reads really well. It's not boring history. Really enjoyed All the Shah's Men by Stephen Kinzer. Neat book.
Yeah, man, sweet. That sounds. I'd like to see the movie version of that.
It needs to be a movie. I don't think it's a Denis Villeneuve one. I don't think he would do like a true history one, because he needs to have creative license, and you don't want to have creative. So someone who can do that kind of stuff. So whoever did Charlie Wilson's War, I'm going to have to look that up, which is when I think of, dramatic movies of history with political kind of bent CIA, I think that's the best. And then all the Tom Clancy movies are kind of similar.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump on my last one here.
Yeah.
I just, as a respect for just the author, I mean, there's just so many really quotes that have come from his writing and just who he is, but just from C.S. Lewis. One of the books that jumped out at me was the Screwtape Letters, and it dials in on just this: our greatest strength and greatest weakness as humans is our free will. And then it just takes a look at it leans on the spiritual side of things, where it takes a look at that free will giving us choice between good and evil, and how it's almost like you get that idea of like the angel and the demon or the devil on your shoulders, constantly of pulling you and pushing you in the right and in the wrong directions. And kind of talks a little bit about these ebbs and flows of life, like these peaks, these big moments, and then just when you bottom out, like when life just like you hit your low, and how we can get so hung up in these spaces that so much more of our life exists in between those two things.
Yeah.
And then I like his language and the way that he puts spirituality, because it makes it so much more it makes it so much. When I read C.S. Lewis or I hear his quotes, he puts it in words that are a lot easier to understand or to at least digest, versus hearing it from like a platform in a church or from.
I feel like in a lot of his works, he's trying to teach philosophy without teaching philosophy, and it can be very interesting, some of his takes.
I agree. And he uses these stories and he uses these metaphors and these images to put things into words that sometimes we just can't, or, some people have, and try to control the way that it should look. And so, just like, the way he, like in the Bible, it talks about like the Holy Spirit, and even just saying that, like on a podcast or talking about that, it can land all kinds of different ways.
That's weird.
People.
Yeah, that's weird.
But he puts it as a sense of ought. Like within us, we all have this conscious where we have a sense of ought, where we ought to do something for the good of mankind, for somebody else, or we ought not go down that dark alleyway. And so for me, that helps me understand it a lot better, and it puts it in words that just makes a whole lot more sense, and it removes some of the like churchy mysticism around it existing within the church. It makes it a lot more, just takes it down to a base level to make it a lot more real.
Yeah.
And so just that struggle between good and evil, and that we have free will, and life is full of those ups and downs, but existing in those ups and downs aren't always the best place to form your feelings and thoughts about your life, because the vast majority of it exists in between those two things. And he just talks about it in that book.
Life is not steady. Life is not steady. Funny enough, my last book in my top 5 is a C.S. Lewis book. I've read the Screwtape Letters, great. The other one in that space that I like from his is The Problem of Pain, which he's trying to explain pain, which a lot of faith traditions try to explain, pain, because the question that most people ask when forced to decide if a God A exists and B cares or has any impact on this world, which will transition to the book I'm going to talk about, is, well, if he cares or has any impact on this world, why do we suffer? And he tries to answer that. And it's an interesting kind of technical look at why pain exists. And I understand his take. If I'm going to summarize it, it's you can't have the absence of pain, which would be utopia, right? Where there is no pain without, and you can't have free will at the same time. So you're just a robot if you have there is no pain, because pain can be as extreme as my leg got cut off, or it can be as minor as, just a minor discomfort. Like, I would like that light I'm about to drive through to be green, but it's red. So the pain of waiting, or, but if we all the time, if every stoplight we ever came to, any of us could decide for it to be green, that's not possible in the three-dimensional and four-dimensional space we live in.
And I think that out of that too comes the question of, is there laughter if there is no pain?
And that's something I love to bug people with all the time. And we won't get into it because that's a fun one. But
because, like, if you think about your analogy of the green lights all the time, how would it be watching the dude drive through all the red lights all the time and his reactions to it? Like, it already makes me chuckle just thinking about.
Yeah, no, my philosopher,
because I feel the pain of red lights.
Yep, my philosophy professor said all laughter is because of some kind of pain on some level, but we don't understand pain to be beyond. Most people just think of pain as physical ouch, or maybe even like emotional pain. There's levels of pain or discomfort. But great book. Definitely not for everyone. It's heavy on the Christian tradition, but there's some interesting. The premise of that, if I recall, Screwtape is a demon.
Yes,
and he's writing letters to his demon boss about the human that he's responsible for tormenting.
Yes.
So it's interesting. So if you want to read something in the religious bent, that's a great book with interesting take. So it's probably my favorite nonfiction book, and I saved it for last, and it's by C.S. Lewis. So it's not one of the Chronicles of Narnia that most people know. So he mostly wrote, kind of theology, hybrid philosophy theology books like Screwtape Letters and Problem of Pain, those sorts of things. He gave it a go with fiction as well. And what a lot of people don't realize is he and Tolkien were good friends, right? And I feel like
he wrote Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe,
right,
which is similar.
Which is a lot less fantasy, although it is fantasy, than The Lord of the Rings. He didn't have to really make up a whole universe of languages and critters. He just used stuff that already existed within other canon, right?
Yeah.
And he just made a gospel message in a kid's book. But I think there's another set of books he wrote called the Space Trilogy. And there's 3 of them.
Yeah, sci-fi stuff.
And I feel like he was pressured, or was just trying to maybe lost a bet, or do something like Tolkien does, where you have to create your own universe, languages, creatures, ecosystems, the whole thing. He created this, and it's the book is, and this one would be, I wonder if the Wachowski sisters, formerly Wachowski brothers, when they wrote, when they put together the Matrix, had read this book. And the book is called Out of the Silent Planet. It's the first book in the trilogy. The other 2 are much different. They're much more heavy-handed with their theology. Where Out of the Silent Planet is much more philosophical. And the premise is this, that it starts off with a guy, in kind of mid-century England, out walking, and he gets grabbed by some scientists I think he knows, and they kidnap him and put him in a spaceship and take him up to another planet. And because they think the aliens, the beings on that planet, want a human sacrifice because they've been there before, and so they're going to bring somebody else. They don't understand what's going on because they haven't really learned the language, and so they bring him up there, and he gets away, and so it's kind of his adventure in what turns out to be Mars in the book. And what he learns, the takeaway, why the title Out of the Silent Planet. The silent planet is Earth, and what that is the energy at the center of the universe, the intelligence or the God or whatever, is no longer involved on Earth. It's silent. That being doesn't show itself on Earth, but it shows itself like once a year or something on a day on Mars. And the way it shows itself is it is the same matter that makes up the whole universe. It is almost like the dark matter. I don't know if C.S. Lewis understood dark matter at the time. And everything in you, it kind of at a string theory level, at a carbon life form level, or at the base molecule that makes up everything in existence, everything is made up of the same substance. Just it moves at different speeds so that we can perceive it, kind of like in the Matrix. And so that intelligence slows down enough for the beings on this other planet to engage with it every once in a while. And why the planet is silent is different, but it's a great fantasy, and what I like about it is the protagonist is impossibly curious. He approaches things he doesn't understand with curiosity so that he can learn about them, and I think that's the big takeaway there. Sweet. Is like Ted Lasso said, be curious, not judgmental. And that's the people that kidnapped him missed that point. So really neat book. It could be a great movie. It's got potential. And then the other ones get a little more difficult, some other planets and those sorts of things. But it's a cool book. Out of the Silent Planet, C.S. Lewis. That's my one kind of philosophy one. I've got some honorable mentions. John, do you have any honorable mentions off the top of your head?
Man, this is all you, man. This is all you.
So again, I did dip into another one on spirituality by a man who I would say now is a deist and philosopher and artist. His name is Rob Bell. And he wrote a book called Velvet Elvis. And it's similar to Out of the Silent Planet and Curiosity. He's teaching people how to think critically about what they believe. And I think the big takeaway there is your belief system a brick wall where if one brick is taken out of there, the whole thing falls down? Or is your belief system a trampoline? I think the big trampoline with all the springs, where it still works if you remove a spring or two, right? Basically it's a manifesto against dogma. Really neat book. Cool. It is in the Christian theology bent, because that's kind of where that is, but I think it's applicable, and I think it would help people understand, because right now we're having a moment in America in particular, which has an impact globally, where the Christian community is divided between kind of the American evangelical side of things and historically what it was, and he's kind of leans into that a little bit, and it's pretty interesting.
Nice.
That's Velvet Elvis, Rob Bell.
Sweet.
Another one that I really like, and this is a history book, although it's important because of what's happening right now in the zeitgeist of politics in America, where we look at and I feel no qualms about saying that Donald Trump and that whole thing is an absolute disaster. Like I don't think you're on Team Human or you're not Team Human. I mean, it's crazy, and I don't want to turn anybody away from the way I think, but I don't from the podcast or what we talk about. But if you've been in that space, like I grew up in an evangelical household, very conservative. My mom burned my cassette tapes. The satanic panic of the 80s and early 90s. Mm-hmm. And I went to one of their colleges, highly conservative college.
Yeah.
And so I know the history. And if you're open about the history and you question some of the things that may have happened to you as a youth, you can see where we are today. And it was very predictable that the conservative evangelical side of the American church, which right now is about 30% of voting Americans, we're going to eventually do this, where they were going to abandon democracy and look to a strongman to try and fight for some dogmatic things they believe in. And this book is called Jesus and John Wayne, just traces that history. It has no opinion. It has no theology. It has no philosophy. It's by Kristen Dumais. And it's just a history of the American Christian church from when this started to happen, when the ball started rolling on where we are today, and it helps make a lot of sense of it, and it keeps you from being, if you're disheartened by the kind of Christian nationalism, or you're disheartened by MAGA, it'll help you understand and make sense of it, that this was inevitable, this was happening. It traces that history from when post World War II, when things were going great, into the 50s. John Wayne was actually patient zero in the evangelical church. At the time, they didn't use the word evangelical. He was patient zero. Like, we need to be involved in the culture. We need to impact culture. And John Wayne was their first guy. So it's not just a catchy title, Jesus and John Wayne. And it led to where we are today, where it's, instead of just focusing on being Christians, there's a big part of the church that wanted to fight a culture war, and so it helps shed some light on that and take away some of the disheartening vibes that come from that, and to know that I don't think it's going to last much longer, because it's really heavily driven by the boomers. The next generation seems to not be down for that. So and my last one is a book that's probably on a lot of people's list. I didn't put it in my top 5 because I didn't want to be that guy who put a book everybody puts on their top 5 list or top 10 list.
I put the Bible on mine, so I'm that guy. So
yeah, well,
I covered it for you.
That's fine. Technically, the Bible is like 64, 66 books. And it's The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera, who I believe is Czechoslovakian, and so it was originally written in that. But an interesting philosophy book on really what it is to be human. And that title, The Lightness of Being, which really says, in the span of the universe and all of time, your impact, your life, being, is so light. It has very little impact on all those things. And trying to find your purpose and your meaning within that, to understand that, like, how do I exist in this space and be happy between, kind of like what you were talking about, the pains I have to experience and the joys I want to experience. And really comes down to what is freedom, which is what we all want. And it really leans into that. And you're following some people who are in kind of a love triangle, looking for, what their version of freedom is, which is why I always kind of joke, going back to that last book on politics, people are like, we just want freedom. Well, freedom, we don't all agree on what that is. As a little kid, I wanted freedom and autonomy. As an adult, I want freedom and autonomy, but it's different from what I want. Yeah. And so it just wrestles with that in a cool kind of fiction story, a little heavy, but really love that book. Really impactful. The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, that was a cool episode. A lot there, a lot on books. But next episode, let's talk food.
Let's do this.
What's food? And I think what I want to lean into is, what do you cook it? Not really just cuisine. Like, how do you prepare the food? And I think sitting at the table with food that's prepared by someone who's sitting at the table is the most important community experience humans can have. Like, that is core to our existence, and to be able to create something or have somebody create something that you share together, powerful. But what's that look like? Is it more than, what is it? So I want to talk about
Sounds
food.
Great.
So that kind of really summarizes the first 4 episodes. And I kind of wanted to talk about that just a little bit as we close. I want to get into more topics of the day as we progress, but we wanted to kick this thing off by saying, here's the things that kind of define us. Get to know John, get to know Vince by the movies, music, and books and food they like. And then I want to get into some topics of the day. So last
Sounds
words,
great.
John, how's school? School's kicking off?
Yeah, kids are all back in school. They're doing their thing. Thankfully, they're doing well. Like, they're in their classes right now, and they're coming home not complaining. They're seemingly, this has been a positive start to the school year, so I'm great with that.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Big stunner, 100. You stupid, just shut up. Keep breezy, I'm gonna. I'm big.